Hey guys, it's Tim Starnes from Cinesamples with a quick tech video follow-up to Mike Patty's 90s Retro Trumpets walkthrough video. If you haven't seen that walkthrough video, I recommend you check it out. Look for the link at the end of this video. The reason we chose to do this is that we decided to make something that we knew we wanted ourselves, which is essentially the foundation of Cinesamples. And it was fun to do the research on how they did things in the 90s. It's a different way of producing a film score. And we hope you like it. I'm going to talk more about the recipe we used to create 90s retro trumpets. This library required some particularly unusual behind-the-scenes work in order to achieve that unique 90s film score color. It was a certainly unique color. It was a magical time of soundtrack recording that is definitely worth revisiting. Whether it's better or worse than modern recording is much less important to us than why it was different. You can form your own opinion as to which you like better. To start the project, we studied the recall sheets from one of history's most popular dinosaur dramas of the early 90s. So we set up Sony Studios exactly as it was for those dates. All of the microphones, preamps, and the chairs, the exact placement. This included renting the 3 actual modified Neumann M50 microphones that were used to record that soundtrack. These rare Decca tree microphones have some very unique sonic qualities, especially a smoothness and an elegance in the high frequencies, without which this project would not be possible. In the 80s and 90s, the Decca tree microphones contributed a much larger percentage of the overall mix than they do today. Back then, the mix was primarily the tree. Close and sectional mics are now used more often to help the music mix pierce the dense elements of sound effects in the final dub. In the earlier days, the music mix was less tweaked and more sonically open. The lack of trumpet close mics allows us to hear the room reflecting and absorbing the sound in a very classical orchestral way that is more characteristic of the early 90s. Another important element of this 90s sound was the use of the Avalon 2055 EQ. It's a discrete Class A 2-channel analog equalizer that has mostly been retired in favor of newer gear or plugins, and it has a unique high-end signature. Its analog high shelf boost adds an elegant air to the overtones and consequently results in a slight dip in the frequencies just below the shelf. It's an instantly recognizable, clean and crisp sound. A final piece of the sonic puzzle was the use of the Lexicon 480 reverb. We resurrected that hardware and used the exact patch listed on the recall sheet. This particular patch was the mainstay of 90s film score recording engineers. When given a specific sound source, which is how we fed it, it renders that unique reverb sound that is so recognizable and characteristic of the most memorable soundtracks from that era. You will find it as the default reverb setting on the settings page on 90s Retro Trumpets. It has an elegant, glossy sound and is less dense than many of the reverbs used today. In the walkthrough video, Mike Patty covered some advantages of 4 trumpets playing in varied tunings. By the way, they actually transposed their parts live. According to our research, the best recipe of trumpets of the early 90s era was an E-flat trumpet, a C trumpet, and 2 B-flats. Something about the different sizes of these trumpets creates a disorganized combination of overtones that sounds very thick and very unique in the room. During our sessions, we had the players bring several horns so we could experiment. We confirmed that when 4 B-flats played together, the sound was almost too perfect and pristine. The technique of mixing horns or having the principal play a smaller horn has been retired in search of a louder and more weighty, uniform sound. The lower horns, the B-flats, can truly push out more air out of the bell in order to compete with 12-piece horn sections that are layered with samples. Finally, and perhaps the most critical piece of reconstructing the sound, was restoring the principal player to a somewhat dictatorial position. In the 90s, a section player would never dare to play as loud as the principal, even at double forte. The interesting result is hearing the principal always on top of the section. If you listen to soundtracks of this era, you can hear the principal dominate the sound in a Divisi chord and in unison in the same manner. It's quite seamless jumping between the two. They always sit on top of the section. Also in this period, what you might be hearing on a double forte, 4 trumpet unison passage is Trumpet 1 truly playing the strong double forte, while Trumpets 2, 3, and 4 provide a single forte foundation of support rich with body. The combination of 3 players playing with body, while the principal cuts through on top, is the magic recipe. For whatever reason, today's brass sections have naturally evolved into a more homogeneous sound, with the principal more closely tucked into the ensemble. We used all of these techniques to record the 90s retro horns as well, which will be released later. We hope you enjoy 90s retro trumpets and hope it inspires you to create as much as it does us. And remember to check out Mike Patty's walkthrough video.